Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Travel and Tourism Podcast, my first season. My guest today was one of my very first guests when I started this podcast, and his episode aired in June of 2021. We spoke exclusively about his first season that time, so I will be posting that link with this episode for anyone who missed it, and I urge you to listen to it, please. We are going to delve into his time aboard the Club Med 1 in 1991, and time permitting, we will talk about other seasons. Please help me welcome back to the podcast from California, Eric Eaton. Hello, Eric. How are you, sir?
En pleine forme, comme d'habitude.
Oh, wow. Very nice accent, too. Did you learn that French in Club Med or in high school?
3 semesters in junior college. And of course, I studied constantly. I had tapes, I had tutorials, I had primers. And then it was friends and girlfriends just always urging me along. Yeah.
And listening to guests speak at the table, I guess, 3 times a day during breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right?
Well, yes. Well, I'll tell you, when I arrived at the Club Med 1, first off, when I flew in, I saw this ginormous grand ship in the bay at Fort de France. Approaching from the harbor, it just seemed like this gigantic machine, which it is. But the interesting thing is, the longer you were on the ship, the smaller it felt. And my first 2 weeks, there was really no English spoken at all. So it was one of those periods in my life where I stopped drinking alcohol and just focused. But simple things like ordering food from a menu. I hadn't studied that. So I would say, for example, même comme mon ami Renaud ici, and just take whatever he had ordered. It was from being issued your uniforms to all kinds of unfamiliar things, even down to the radio communications with the officers, which were all in French military, sometimes code.
You spent 8 months aboard the Club Med 1 with Chef de Village Françoise Gravier, and you did the Atlantic crossing. So can you tell our listeners what ports of call, I guess, you visited?
Well, so we had a different itinerary almost every week, and it could be based on who was on the ship. If it was a group, they would be able to pick their own itinerary. We had certain ports that we would frequent, like St. Thomas, Charlotte Amalie. We would frequent the Tobago Cays. We would frequent, of course, Martinique, our port of call. Barbados was another frequent stop, but we would often mix it up, sometimes not going to any of those.
Oh, really? Now, did you have a favorite destination of yours that you would look forward to?
They were all wonderful and great, but I'll get into it in a little bit. But pillaging the village had to do with taking guests out shopping. And more or less the deal that we struck was that for every 10 tuxedos, for example, I would get one free. And so I loved St. Thomas and Barbados and, other ports where we had vendors and nightclubs where we could take people to and dine and party and play for free.
Okay. I don't know how you want to start. Did you want to talk about, I guess, the things that you have to do when you work aboard a ship, like cargo and being a cargo and boat crane operator, abandon drills, all that? Like, however you want to start, Eric. You're the boss here, so I'll let you steer this ship.
Well, when I arrived, they gave me a red and white striped shirt immediately and said, "You're doing luggage and cargo." And that was a favorite time because we could hang out and gossip while the crane was operating, waiting for the luggage to come up. But we would grab that luggage in a panic, throw it all in an elevator, and we'd either run up the stairs or run down the stairs to grab the elevator and then distribute the bags. That was my very first introduction to the ship, and the way I kind of learned my way around was delivering luggage and baggage. And then cargo, we would get in a gang line, and we would hand boxes and cans and cartons and whatnot. And everything had to be loaded within just a few hours. And that would include fuel and water, which were in part the ballast control systems for the sailing ship.
I'll have to ask this question. I'm sorry. What's worse, doing luggage in a village or luggage on a ship?
I didn't mind either, to be honest. It was kind of a camaraderie hour where you and your friends would compete to see who could move things around the quickest.
And about how many times a week do you do these like abandon drills or safety drills?
So the second day of the week, you had to have an abandon drill. That's Coast Guard protocol. And that was one of my first assignments, which kind of shocked me. I noticed the officers watching me very closely the first few days. And that's because I ended up being a key role with all of the ships. I was abandoned ship muster station captain number 3. I had the assignment of the number 3 Hurricane, which is a Pinto Volvo diesel jet boat. I had the terrorist repulsion unit 3 assignment. I had the armory assignment for the shotguns for bell trap skeet shooting. Imagine that. GOs being handed
Oh, wait,
shotguns.
excuse me, Eric. So there was skeet shooting on the ship?
Oh yeah.
Really? Okay. Was this a paid thing, or was it
Yeah,
included?
it was an extra expense. I received my first BB gun when I was 5, my first 22 when I was 7. And I used to shoot that BB gun one-handed all the time. So I would showboat and shoot these clay pigeons one-handed, and that's why they put me in charge. Well, I knew how to maintain shotguns, and I was a sharpshooter. That was a lot of fun. That was a blast, literally.
Did you shoot both eyes open or one eye open?
Both.
Okay. Is that hard to do? Because most people want to aim with, whatever right or
I
left eye
grew up
closed.
hunting pheasant, quail, rabbits. I never, it was a natural thing for me.
Okay. For those that don't know, like I've never been aboard the ship, but I know that yes, you have a chief of village, but the real chief is obviously the captain. Do you recall
Commodore.
who your commodore was?
I don't remember his name.
Okay. Did
It
you, did
could
you ever
have
get
been,
contact with him, or you see
could
him
have
at
been,
dinner?
oh yes. Actually, we grew to have a fairly close relationship. And crossing the Atlantic, he took me up and had me guide the ship from the control port. And it was very touching. He said, "If I ever had a son, I would like him to be like you."
Oh, that's nice. What's
Yeah.
it, what's it like steering a ship like that?
Well, I mean, everything on the ship has to do with ballast. And that's cargo, that's human beings, that's the water supply. And then you've got wings instead of a keel that can be protruded depending on the force of the wind. And then, of course, you've got 1,200 square meters of sail that can be furled or unfurled depending on, your navigation points. And growing up as a sailor and, of course, windsurfing, I had that pretty well handled. But, for example, the meals depending on the direction of the wind. And you've heard the term posh, right? Port side
Yep.
out, starboard home.
Yep.
Okay, so they would do that with many of the guests in the suites because the higher up you are, the more that weight affects the ship. So it was sold as a premium, but the real big reason was for ballast. And we would move some of the geos around depending front, back. We had the merchant marines and the officers in the front. They had private mess halls. Most of the geos were in the lower floors, which actually have less movement. I shared the back suite with Jan Redrup, who is the cruise director, and Steve Riley, who is the chief of entertainment.
Oh, Steve Riley was aboard during your time?
Yeah, yeah, he was a roommate. And they
Okay.
put me back there, and people questioned this at first, but the intention was they knew they were going to put me in charge of many activities in the Hall Nautique, including the abandoned 3 station was right above my room. And so strategic, but people at first thought, why is he getting this first class treatment along with the heavy hitters, just being a windsurfing responsible?
Okay, so that was your main job. You were sailing and windsurfing aboard the ship, or just windsurfing?
Yeah, but I'll tell you, before I even left for the ship, I thought to myself, how do you teach windsurfing or sailing from a ship at anchor? Because you've got a wind shadow. Well, the deal is you don't. So I would teach mainly from the beach. We'd have beach days and picnic days. As far as the windsurfing, when the wind was up, they expected me to be entertaining guests. It was considered animation for me to be on the water doing freestyle windsurfing.
Can you explain to our listeners how if you will, the back of the ship would open for you to do activities like water ski, for example? Like, did it take a long time for it to open?
Not really, about probably 2, 3 minutes, but it was a big floating pontoon, basically, is what they called it, with hinges on either side that would lower down and open up. And that was one of the things that scared me aboard the ship. I mean, a metal ship was always kind of questionable to me because metal's heavy and ships sink. But then my room's right by this opening in the stern of the ship that, how watertight is that? So I was very happy to be in charge of one of the abandoned ship stations and the guns because a big focus was terrorist repulsion. We had metal detectors. we actually practiced defending the stern of the ship by throwing balls to hit the ceiling, floor, and corners to simulate ricocheting shotgun blasts around corners to hit terrorists.
Okay. I have to go back to two things, Eric, because I didn't want to cut you off. So, number one, how often during a week would the sales actually go up?
Well, that depended on the conditions, the area, and also the waves. When we were in the Atlantic, we'd have the sails up more often because the sails actually help stabilize the ship. And so the wings would come out, the sails would go up, the ballast would go to the windward side of the ship. The passengers would be staged on the windward side of the ship. I mean, if we're doing Trivial Pursuit or a dance or musicians or professional singers or skeet shooting, it would be on the windward side so that we could keep the boat as level as possible.
Okay, and you also mentioned one of my favorite trivia questions, which I managed to stump everyone. You actually knew what posh meant, but do you know the actual origin of this acronym?
Port side out, starboard home. That came from luxury liners out of England.
Yes, back in the early days, only so the shady room, the ship's stateroom was on the ship's shady side, right? So only the wealthy could afford that to be in the shade going out and back. So on the ticket, they would to shorten it, they would write posh. So posh then became known as wealthy, regal.
Well, what's interesting, the heavy hitters, the wealthy people would want the suites because they had balconies and views. But when you're in the Atlantic, the most movement you have is up high in the middle, right?
Yeah. That's
In
right.
the lower floors in the center, you have the least movement. We were in the back, basically steerage. The suite that we had was made to be a luxury suite for families. And the problem was it was steerage. You could hear the grinding of the gears every time it went into forward or reverse. So we used to joke, we never needed an alarm clock. When the ship set anchor, we knew it.
Well, you mentioned the wealthy. Let's get into that because I'm kind of mildly fascinated by lottery winners, and you told me you would get lottery winners aboard. So can you tell us about that, please?
Well, over time, as I became more and more involved in public relations, they would assign me to watch certain people that were either loud or, had odd behaviors, or people that leased multiple suites. And, it was a game for me to guess who had won the lottery because you'd look at them and say, okay, you booked 9 suites. Something's going on here. You look very normal and average.
Well, excuse me, Eric. Roughly back then, how much do you think 9 suites aboard, which was probably the most expensive product that Club Med offered at the time? What do you think like that would be in American dollars? Do you have any idea?
That's not even on my radar.
Oh, okay. It would be a lot, right?
It wasn't francs. It
Yeah,
wasn't francs.
It would be a lot, right? I'm guessing 9.
Yeah, that's one of the way Club Med made their money. They
Yeah.
Through converting currencies. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine. Yeah. So someone, would naturally have to be a lottery winner if this is happening frequently, correct?
Right. And so they would often enjoy being accompanied on shore. And we knew all the ins and outs and the nightclubs and the bars and the sights to see, et cetera. And they felt like we were their shore protection. And so they would buy us clothes and watches and jewelry and, just crazy things. And we'd be smoking cigars and drinking Cristal champagne and just living it up. But, some of them would return. And typically they'd arrive with a supermodel boyfriend or girlfriend. The third time, if they returned, we were their only friends. We were like their safe, fun place, and they were not liking their life with the lottery. And very often they would cry by Wednesday.
What do you mean?
Oh, they'd be in tears. My family, my girlfriend, my life, my friends,
Oh, okay. Got it.
whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd
Because
often tell them, tell you what, you give me the money, I'll give you my job. Everybody can be happy.
that's right. You can go back to having, no money and be happier. Well,
Yeah.
tell me, did you have, speaking of wealthy, did you have any celebrities ever come aboard that you knew or knew about?
Every Club Med celebrity is chief of village. And I think of every chief of village as a celebrity. I mean, the talent, soirée chanson with some of these chief of villages competing and the dance floor and cabaret flash. I just couldn't believe the entertainment on the Club Med one. And some of our shows would be up to 3 hours long. That would
3 hours, you said?
that would be for Atlantic rough ocean crossings. It was to, take the attention off the movement of the ship and preoccupy the people. But we had professional singers and professional musicians, and everybody would join in. But like Rock Me Amadeus, a show called Voyage, were very, very long.
And I guess they'd have to translate in a few languages before the show, I imagine, right?
Always, yeah, typical Club Med.
And were the majority of the guests, would you say, were European?
Really depended. Let me give you a little start as far as the way I was introduced to the ship. The first 2 weeks, we had mainly GOs visiting from Martinique on Saturdays, which I missed because I was always airport duty. My whole career, I was always airport duty, public relations, first face they see, last impression they leave with. We had all kinds of chief of villages on and a lot of Europeans, politicians, big business people. Of course, Club Med was the largest corporation in France at the time. I don't know if it still is, but a lot of vendors for Club Med were showing up, and I didn't know who these people were. And then there were the 68e, the people that came of age in 1969. And they were a whole different breed. They were like bohemian hippies, and they didn't really get along with the younger GOs on the ship. But for whatever reason, they were really attracted to an American like me. So, the first couple of weeks, I had the 68ems, calling me to dance on the floor and inviting me to table. And, that was kind of neat. But I was segregated from the rest of the ship who were really enjoying these other dignitaries that were coming aboard.
These dinners that they invited you to would often turn out to be 2 hour sit down dinners. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. 10, 12 course.
Oh, boy. Okay.
So in the first weeks, we had etiquette classes, and that could be everything from different ways to tying a necktie or a bow tie to spooning an oyster or, cleaning a shelled shrimp with a knife and fork. You cut the head off first, you stick the fork through where the legs are, you take the legs off, you unwrap the shell. And it was funny because we would smile at each other in those first weeks because guests would watch us, shelling shrimp, and they'd just be amazed. And it was a new talent we learned, but we just thought we were so cool. But, which fork to use, which glass to use, how the plates are stacked, how to, place a napkin when you're finished with an entree, how to speak at the table, the conversations to have, the conversations not to have, how to be polite and listen. I mean, and we had to be 5 to 7 lingual on the ship because we had a lot of Germans, Italians, we had the Spanish ports, we had Belgians, we had people from Quebec. It was like we had to learn all of these different little pleasantries and at least be able to say, watch your step or enjoy your meal or how are you doing this evening? What was the most interesting thing you did today in each language?
In addition to these etiquette classes, did you not also have waltz tango dance training?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
How are you with that?
To be honest, it was mainly little old ladies that wanted to dance the tango and the waltz. And sometimes they didn't have the best breath, etc. This was clever and fun. I started teaching people how to make paper roses out of napkins. And I'd stand at the entrance and I'd make the paper roses. And it became such a fascination that I got excused from the dance floor. So I would, teach them how, well, if you're going to go out on a date, you don't have a bouquet. Here's how you can make, half a dozen rose flowers in moments.
According to my notes here, Eric, I see the Club Ed 1 was built in France in 1990. So you were aboard, was it 91 or 92 that you first stepped foot on it?
91.
Okay, so it was brand new. You're one of the few XGOs that saw the ship brand new, correct?
Oh, everything was brand new. All of the equipment, sports equipment, the boats, everything was new.
That's pretty impressive, I think, right? To be like the first of something, right? To be one of the first people aboard the ship.
Well, we all felt special, and Francoise would tell us often that we were princes and princesses, the new royalty for Club Med, and we really felt that way.
Okay. What Hammer does, you kind to your GOs and then they'll take care of the guests, right?
Of course.
Yeah. What would you like to talk about next about the ship?
Well, okay. So the second week we had a whole group of orthopedic surgeons that were studying implantology and mechanical joints, et cetera. And they were very nerdy. Many of the European geos just didn't understand them. And so people like Steve Riley and Jan and myself, we were really forced out into the public to take a real leading role. And that was fun because Francoise and others really depended on us for communication and just understanding the wants and needs and what they were doing. And they weren't interested in the shows, and they weren't really interested in going into shore overall, other than to use the phones and go to the post office. The third week, we had Buick North America, and these sons of guns, they had exotic language, let's put it this way, especially the Texans and people from Oklahoma and New York and, just all over the country. So they all had different accents that the geos again struggled with. And, Francoise would often think people were upset, but they were just expressing themselves in exotic terms. So that was kind of fun to explain to her, what they were saying and why they were saying it. And these were car salesmen. They used a lot of salesy jargon and were fairly manipulative, and I knew how to work and, function around them.
Explain to her they're not angry at all. They're actually very happy. Okay.
Right.
That's why they're swearing. They're happy. Okay.
Right. Oh, and these guys came on board drunk. They drank the whole time. They'd sing pirate songs in the casino at night. They would, the morning they left, they all had Bloody Marys in their hands. It was just one nonstop drink-a-thon.
Okay, so you just said something I didn't know. There was a casino aboard.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm guessing geos weren't allowed access to that, right?
For the most part, that's why it was really weird when they demanded to stake me, that the car salesman, that they let me go in and play. And they wanted to school me on roulette, which I actually learned very well. And on a ship, believe it or not, you've got an advantage against the house because of the movement of the ship, the way it affects the ball.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. Okay. If you're in rough waters or something, how does that? So it's possible that ball could jump out of the color it was in, right?
No, but if you timed it, you
Okay.
could more or less tell where it was going to land. We had a lady that was actually banned. She was from Monaco,
Oh,
and she was just
really?
calling in cash, and she was teaching me how to do this, and I've used it since. I've won pretty good in Las Vegas.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh yeah.
Now, did you choose a number or a color? Were you a color man or a number man?
Well, it's a whole science.
Okay.
You play colors, rows, numbers, odd, even in patterns.
Do you ever recall the GM winning big while you were there?
Oh yeah, the lady from Monaco.
Oh, really?
They
Okay.
they cut her off. Yeah.
Oh, okay. They cut her off. Okay, that's what you mean by ban. Okay, they cut her. Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. So you put a Monegasque aboard a ship. Yeah, Monaco has some of the best casinos in the world, I hear too. So yeah, okay, that's pretty
exactly.
impressive. Getting cut off from from going to the casino on your vacation. What a compliment. Okay.
So one of my joys was doing security, tourism repulsion circuits. So over time, people would go stir crazy, and a lot of people had really tiny staterooms with bunks over, under, and cramped quarters, not like what I was experiencing. But I could go out in the number 3 hurricane and do circuits of the ship and literally sing to the wind, practice my stage singing while I'd be cruising around the ship and looking at the wildlife and the surroundings. And I was always the first ship lowered. And that was because the Port Authority would only allow one, but the Coast Guard required a security boat doing circuits prior to giving authorization for anchorage. So just after that, depending on the weather and other conditions, I could run into town and do beer runs for my friends and pick up odds and ends, which was a huge advantage. But the other thing I had was the number 3 abandoned pod. And I would leave the hatch unlatched, and I could go in there anytime I wanted to, play my radio, write my letters, just have a complete alone time, which really didn't happen for anybody else on the ship.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, and you don't have to answer this question, but what songs did you like to sing? Do you recall?
Formidable, La Bamba, Toda La Vida, anything from Willie Nelson, On the Road Again, most anything from the Beatles other than Help. I don't know why I choked on Help. I had a large library of songs, and we had a karaoke machine that we used to practice on relentlessly. I mean, I've always had the habit of sleeping only 5 or 6 hours a night since I was a little kid. My first vacation experience was at 2 months old in northern Michigan, and there we only had 6 hours of darkness. So I just developed this habit of only sleeping 5 or 6 hours a night. So I'd be roaming the decks and getting things done, and the captain and the officers would recognize this, and they very much appreciated my diligence and reporting.
Okay. Now, I see you were aboard 8 months. So did you get any vacation in that time? And if so, did you go to Martinique or another village?
Yes. So I had a couple of Saturdays. We all had a couple of Saturdays where we got to roam around Martinique, but we had days off every week. When we were in St. Thomas, it was considered a day off. I would spend my time going shopping with people aboard. I kind of felt since I wasn't teaching windsurfing and there weren't that many people involved in the sports, I wanted to make myself useful and important and valued. And so I did that by taking people on shore excursions, basically. So yeah, Barbados, I'd take them on a tour of all the pirate bars in Bridgetown, and we'd hit up the tuxedo shop and jewelry stores. And
You've mentioned tuxedo shop twice. It's just so foreign to me that, there is a tuxedo shop, right? I mean, maybe it's not strange to you because you did 8 months, but for someone like me, it just seems strange. There is a tuxedo shop, right? I mean, or
well,
am
all
I?
of all of the cruise ships had, elegant night. And so we had 2 nights a week where we wore tuxes.
Oh,
And by trading with the clients buying tuxedos, I had white, gray, and black that I could mix and match along with a dozen or more cummerbunds and bow ties.
I'm guessing this is the only product of Club Med where the GO does not have to do their own laundry. I'm guessing you were able to hand it off to someone,
Yeah,
right?
we had laundry service.
That must have been nice, right?
Yes and no. Sometimes, you'd forget something like your cufflinks or a piece of jewelry or something in a pocket, and it'd be awkward if it didn't show up, but then who knows what happens.
Okay.
This is an interesting incident that most geos wouldn't believe. So on airport duty one weekend, a girl arrives with a water ski, and she's got more luggage than any five passengers typically would bring. And she was just drop dead gorgeous. I mean, everybody turned their heads. And we hit it off pretty much right away. And during the week, we had this very open romance that created gossip on a level you just can't imagine. And when she left, it was like a vacuum, and people realized this was very entertaining for everybody on the ship. So, long story short, 3 weeks later, she came back with a full contract, first season GO, water ski, and our assignment basically was to be romance animators.
What does that mean?
She would lip balm me in front of people. Her first night back, she showed up in a Victoria's Secret gown that would blow your mind. She crossed the floor and said out loud, "You had me at hello," and lip balmed me. And I mean, the room just erupted.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, Eric. So this was, I guess, before the time where, because you heard of public displays of affection. So this was okay. This was sanctioned, is what you're saying, right?
Because of the gossip that rippled through the ship.
Okay. Francoise Gravier was on board. Like everything was like
Well,
because it was kind
it was her idea to bring her back.
okay, so it was a kind of like an animation passage, if you will, that
Oh yeah.
you both stayed in character for the
Oh, but
duration.
it was people would always show up and say, "What did she say? What did she say?"
Okay,
Because
got it.
she had every female comedian's lines down pat.
Really?
Oh yeah, she'd say things like the "Don't break your arm, breaking your back, patting yourself on the back as you fall off that high horse."
Okay.
I'd look at her and say, "What?" And I'd have to explain. But yeah, she was like Carol Burnett, Maud, and looked like Jane Fonda and Sigourney Weaver on steroids.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I now you painted the picture. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That must have been fun.
Oh yeah. I mean, and she just loved it. She had a video camera, and she knew that it made people uncomfortable, and she would go around with this video camera with no tape in it and pretend to be taping geos and say things that would embarrass them, like your mom dresses you funny, or what's the grimace for? Fancy pants? You got a wedgie or what? And
It's
of course, they didn't understand what she was saying, and I'd have to explain. And then these phrases would circle around the ship from one person to the next to the next, and it was just a constant comedy routine.
it's too bad now that I think about it. She didn't have film in there because I'm sure a lot of geos would have loved to see that footage now, right?
Well, I
Captured.
did send you some that she
Yeah.
captured. I guess you weren't able to open it.
Well, yeah. Are you able? Do you have a YouTube channel, Eric? Because are you able to put these up anywhere? Like, do you have a?
I'll play with that.
If you could, that because I would love so much love for their listeners to see this.
My life has never changed. I literally still sleep 5 hours or less a night. I
Same,
work 10 hours
same.
or more. I play. I mean, I'm going off to drive a party limo to a wedding in an hour until midnight. And yeah.
Well, you mentioned, yeah, we both sleep the same amount of hours now. Like me, do you still dream about Club Med that you're back there working? Do these dreams
So I'll
haunt you?
tell you about lucid dreaming at
Okay.
another time. I'll
Okay.
send you a clip. I wrote a book on the dream vacation. I used to teach people how to dream.
Okay.
And
All
I'd
right.
get them sleepwalking and all kinds of funny things. It was hilarious. I did it on the Club Med one.
Okay. So it was part of the show, I guess.
No, I would do this on rainy days and stormy days, kind of thing. People would be down about their vacation. I tell them, I said, you came here for a dream vacation, didn't you? Yeah. Well, let's talk about dream vacations and how you can dream about this vacation and project to the next vacation and teach people how to deja fate so they would deja vu. In other words, practice life in your dreams to manifest it in your future.
It just occurred to me, you said rainy day. It didn't occur to me that there would be a rainy day program aboard the Club Med One. So was there, and would you do bar games, I guess, to entertain the guests?
It would often go to Cabaret Flash, the professional entertainers, Palace Night, Casino Night. We had Carnival nights. I guess I didn't put in the notes that I actually went overboard.
Whoa. How so?
So it was crossing of the equator, which would normally be a carnival night. The end of the night, we would drop balloons from netting from the animation booth. And I had just performed the Les Pompiers de Paris. So I was in all black dance skin with a boulder hat and mustache and Repetto shoes. And I walked out of the booth onto the upper deck, and the wind caught my hat. And I lunged to grab the hat, and over the rail I went.
Oh,
Fortunately, I caught the cable with my left hand. We were in the middle of a large strait. It was, 1 a.m. or so, and my roommates wouldn't have missed me till the next day. So I hate to think what would have happened wearing all black in the middle of the ocean with barely any lights twinkling in the far distance, with sea monsters and everything else to be considered. I actually had a lot of nightmarish dreams over that incident.
yeah,
Very,
no, I can imagine. That sounds terrifying.
yeah.
Not to mention that, yeah, you would be a speck in the ocean and the cost to turn around a ship. I know it's not an easy thing. They
Uh,
obviously, they would have gone for you, but I'm just saying that that just you describing it gave me anxiety.
Well, and I would have, a lot of nightmarish dreams about lowering the ships. They liked me to be raising and lowering the ships because the water ski guys would be getting the water ski ready. The scuba guys would be out on the Hall Nautique. And since I wasn't teaching windsurfing or sailing for the most part, I was raising and lowering the ships. Well, it was roughly 35 feet, which doesn't sound like much, but if those cables snap, they could cut you in half. And what about landing, having dropped 35 feet in the hull of a ship? And if you jump, what lands on you? So that was always a big concern of mine. And the captain would always comment that I knew more about the mechanics and was very diligent about checking the oil and such as they were lowering the ship. But I was doing that, white knuckled, holding on to the security rope, thinking that a cable could break at any moment.
Wow. Okay. You remain unscathed, correct? Like all
Well,
two.
okay, so we had an odd occurrence where I was taking a water ski boat to raise it, and it started sinking. And I started calling for Renaud and Philippe, who were my best friends. We were known as the three, more or less the three musketeers, because we were in charge of the skeet shooting. The boat was sinking rapidly, and I'm running this thing fast enough so the water's not rushing in, but I'm screaming at them to lower the cable. And the cable snapped onto the hook right as it went under. I mean, just 2 seconds later. So here I am with this waterlogged water ski boat that they can't raise because it's too heavy. They've got it taut, but I'm afraid the cables are going to snap and I'm going to, get wounded. And then there was the daunting thought of swimming to the Hall Nautique, which was about 450 feet to the stern. But then we were in deep water. And, one of the reasons I didn't teach much sailing or windsurfing is people would see the sharks and the big fish and turtles and whales from the upper decks. And we would too. And so I was very cautious about getting in that deep water.
I just have to go back for a sec, Eric. You mentioned that you crossed the equator. So I worked with an ex-GO that was either aboard the Club Med 1 or 2, maybe the 2, that when he crossed Cape Horn, he got a tattoo on his watch hand. So on his left wrist, he got a tattoo, covered it with his watch. So when you cross the equator, you get a shellback turtle tattoo. Did you get one?
So that is funny. A lot of the guys on the ship got tattoos. On one drunk evening out in Charlotte, Mali, I was almost coaxed into doing that. And what I was going to do was have a windsurfer tattooed on the hollow of my heel because it'd be out of sight and, not something to be awkward about in the future. And the tattoo
Ouch.
artist said that is one of the most painful parts of your body to
Yes.
tattoo.
Yes. As soon as you
So
said
I
it.
said, okay, we're done.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You were saved, trust me. Okay. I can't even
Right.
imagine that. I winced again when you said that story. Okay. Wow.
But one of the funny things was all the contraband items that we could buy on shore, but also I told you the history of people bringing things to airports and then having guests bring it to you. Well, that continued on the Club Med One until early 1992, when the airport securities more or less shut that down. But we were sending things to Martinique, through guests, and we had a meeting. You can't send fake Rolexes to the village of Martinique anymore. Turtle leather belts cannot be shared. For the most part, we were banned from sending gifts to our friends in the village because a lot of what they wanted was the contraband that we had access to, but they did not.
Where were the fake Rolexes from?
Oh, well,
Uh,
St. Thomas was a big location.
oh, okay.
Barbados. Yeah, I made a deal. I kept seeing the same person over and over and over, and finally, he sold me 5 fake Rolex watches for $100.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'll
Deal.
tell you that this was kind of the end of the story, but leaving Paris, they searched my luggage, etc. And when we got to JFK, they waved us through, and I went to Dallas, and they were searching everybody. And they asked the man, 4 passengers in front of me, to take his watch off because they wanted to check it. Well, I was wearing a fake Rolex on my left wrist. So I shoved my hand deep in my pocket. I've got my 2 trunks on my skateboard with my windsurf board, my 8 sails, my 2 masts, my 3 booms, my boom box, my carry-ons. And I'm pushing this through one-handed, which should have been suspicious. And they asked me, what were you doing with all of this equipment? And I started to tell them, and they laughed and they, rolled their eyes and said, okay, go ahead, go on through. But, that was a close call. I really thought I was going to get nabbed. And what did I have in my trunks? Oh boy,
Lots of stuff, right?
lots of lots of lots of stuff.
I have to ask you, Eric, did you request the Club Med one or you were sent there?
No. So what happened was my third season in St. Lucia. That was my favorite village. I had 3 seasons there. The High Wind Center, Lulu was often there. We had great equipment. We had, incredible conditions. I mean, I took my skill level to the point where I just did not know of any stunts that I had not already mastered because we could windsurf 4 to 6 hours each day. Just crazy. I thought, I don't want to continue to leave the American zone. I need to have fluent French or better French. So I thought, I'm going to leave Club Med, go back to production in Marin County, working with GGP Sports, Lucas Landis, and interning with Viacom. And I was still taking classes at the College of Marin, taking French, master swim program, and of course, video film production. Jean de Canal in Paris would check in every once in a while. And I was working also as a manager in a restaurant, and I sent him a couple of photos with me wearing jackets and ties. The Club Med One offer came completely out of the blue. I had no clue that the ship even existed. And I really struggled with that because I had never had a roommate. I'm thinking roommates, but they're days off, and we're going to see pretty much every port of call in the Caribbean. And then there was the whole formal night concept. Will I enjoy that? And 2 and 3 hour dinners. But I was so glad that I took this opportunity because it just felt like a perfect match. I mean, everything I had done in life up to that point just fit.
Because you were on such a high, does that high carry over to Guadeloupe your next season, or will
Uh,
nothing ever match the Club Med one?
oh, nothing ever matched the Club Med one. Nothing ever matched my first season in turquoise, ever, never. And you know what we left out, of course, was the Pepsi commercial. And that changed my
From
whole career to GO
from your first season in turquoise, right?
because that's how I became responsible in my second month. That's why my pay went up. I made several $1,000s. I was the only GO on TV in North America. So I'd go to the airport and people go, look, it's him. And I'd be, it's just wild. And I would sign autographs and people would send me gifts. And that continued for what, 2 years it played. And even on the Club Med one, I had people visiting that, like to say they're going off to visit the Pepsi guy.
So were you only allowed to drink Pepsi and not Coca-Cola in every village?
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
I never liked Pepsi, Coke. I never liked
Oh,
soft drink.
oh, really? Okay.
I
Wow.
did another commercial when I was in Turquoise the second time. They flew us down to Trinidad, and it was for a soft drink called Ting. Yeah, I did also High Tide Clothing and the Sonora Bay Tourism Board commercials. Yeah, so I always had a little bit of a following. That's one of the reasons they liked me on airport duty is, I was somewhat recognizable or the gossip would spread around. And that was always a weird thing. Arriving in JFK and people showing up with their Trident magazines, which I had several photos in and asking for autographs. I mean, I remember going into a bathroom and just laughing as hard as I could laugh, thinking this is the most ridiculous thing I could have never, ever imagined.
Did you ever go to when you were aboard the Club Med One, did you go to Martinique Airport to receive some guests?
Oh, often.
I have to admit, when I was in Martinique, I've never in my life felt so underdressed standing next to the Club Med people. They'd come in their, Ralph Lauren blazers, blue blazers, and white pants, and I just felt so inadequate standing next to them. They had that beautiful sign for guest. We had something scribbled on a paper.
It was actually Hugo Boss.
Okay, Hugo Boss. Okay, that's right. Sorry.
And one funny thing about the uniforms, we all had shoes show up and they were deck shoes and people were tying them in bows and I tied mine in a square knot and then made barrel knots, which is basically a nail knot on the end, which is the way real sailors wear their shoes. And when you walk, they'd make a tapping sound. And Francoise immediately called me over. She had to have her shoes tied with my, barrel knots. And I ended up either teaching geos or tying barrel knots for everybody on the ship. So it was fun that when we do an abandoned ship, for example, everybody would be marching along or even running, and you'd hear the rap, 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 rap of these barrel knots.
This brings me to an interesting point. I just realized now that you probably no doubt had a GM, we all had it, who actually loved a certain geo shirt, part of the uniform, and offered you money or something for it. So now that you have a Hugo Boss, were there any like clothes collectors that offered you something for your blazer or something?
That was an interesting thing. No, our clothes were all inventoried. We had, of course, dress code. And when the geos left the ship for the last time, they all had to surrender 100% of their uniforms and be inventoried. Francoise, as a really nice gesture, told me to keep everything.
You still have it?
Most of it, yeah.
Okay, nice.
I still have my trunks packed with everything ready to go if they called tomorrow.
Okay, if you're listening to this, Miami, okay, this man might be available.
I could do that. I'm looking towards my retirement. I can take Social Security in 2 years, and I'm doing this limo bus driving, because back in the day, I could drive a bus in St. Lucia and not have a license, or I could captain a boat and didn't need a license. So I'm going through the Maritime Institute, getting my boat captain's license, getting my commercial driver's license experience in place. And yeah, I'm thinking of doing some sort of a resort, something, national parks, Caribbean resort. I don't know. We'll see.
But if Club Med needed you in Turks and Caicos to take up the be head of sailing and windsurfing, would you sorry, sailing? So now they don't have windsurfing anymore. Would you do it?
I would do that.
Yeah, it'd be awfully tempting, right?
Yeah, I would do that. Yeah.
Let's go back to the Club Med one for a moment. Eric, can you please tell me what it's like crossing the Atlantic?
Well, I felt so honored to be enlisted for the crossing. Pretty much all of the geos, left the ship with the intentions of European geos replacing them once we arrived in Funchal, Madeira. And then later in Morocco, we picked up other geos. But they kept me aboard because they wanted me, one, for ship security, two, for maintenance. We overhauled the engines and took apart the Hurricanes, and three, for inventorying all the sports equipment. But then I was also a key public relations person. And during a crossing, it's interesting. Many passengers will stay in their cabin. Some specialize in doing crossings because they like the alone, romantic sensations that you have as you get out into open sea and then hit the rolling swells of the mid-Atlantic, which, is something different than you'd ever imagine. And then the sensations of seeing the sea change and the two oceans coming together with different colors. It's funny the way our hearts leapt when we saw our first dolphins and our first bird. The first bird actually tilted the ship. The captain had to steer into the wind because everybody wanted to see that first bird and get a photograph of it. And I've got a photograph, and it's a speck on a piece of camera film that seems silly, but it was.
Excuse me, Eric. Can you explain why that's a big thing?
You're out in the middle of nowhere. It's like being on the dark side of the moon, and then you start to see life again. And it meant we're approaching Europe. So we land in Funchal, and they sent me up to do basket sliding and Port Madeira tasting. And this was kind of funny because there they don't really have restrooms in the common sense, and they definitely don't have toilet paper. You have to carry napkins or something. But they had a pit. And I'm watching these guys crushing grapes as somebody else is leading the tour. And one of them gets out and he goes to relieve himself. He walks back through the dirt, gets back in and keeps stomping on the grapes. Well, when it came around time for tasting, I said, "Well, no, it's okay. I'm going to pass. I'm feeling tired, But that was kind of weird. Morocco, we were greeted by a huge couscous festival. And you think of couscous as having your typical seven, side dishes to go with this. This was hundreds of side dishes, but everything from monkey brain to rat to, any creepy crawly critter you could ever imagine they had. But a lot of noise, a lot of blasts by blunderbusters, but the music and the whirling dervishes was just amazing. And I remember sitting with Philippe and Renaud, my good friends, and we were discussing camel rides and knockoff jackets and purses. And each meal we would have people come through and they'd say, well, we had a 2-hour camel ride and it cost us $100. And someone else would come through and say, well, we had a 15-minute ride and we paid $400. And it was just amazing what these Moroccans could extract from the tourists. But Morocco is definitely something very different from any other place I've ever gone to. And then from there, we went up to Portugal, where I met some of the shortest people that I never could have imagined existed on Earth. They were shorter than my belt loops. We went to buy beer, and I didn't realize that the beer in Portugal is sweet beer. It's like thick with honey, horrible. But after that, we went through the Straits of Gibraltar. They wanted me to go onto shore for security, but they wanted me to carry a sidearm, which I just really thought I didn't have a license. I hadn't been trained. I'd never fired a 38. and certainly didn't want to be sitting on a foreign port with a gun. So I got out of that. But the rest of the cruise, I mean, it's like any other season ending. We'd look at each other with these longing eyes, knowing that we would probably never see each other again, and laughing till our sides burst and telling stories and reminiscing. And the European geos would be practicing their Texas or Oklahoma accent and all of the interesting sayings that my girlfriend would bring to the table. And it was a fun way to end the cruise. But getting off with my friends and heading to Paris, I just felt I felt like a lost puppy. We left the ship. I mean, I cried. So we get to Paris and we spent a few days adventuring around and eventually ended up in the Paris office. And we went in and met John the Canal and everybody else. And each of the guys got to look through their work portfolio. And I had a work portfolio, and it looked like it used to be fat, but I just had a couple Pepsi commercial photos in it and a couple of other photos of me windsurfing. And they said, "Well, your file's in New York." And I thought, okay, that's fine. But these guys spent a long time reminiscing through all their memories that they had in their file. And so when I finally got to New York, I asked to see my file, and they said, "Oh, we don't have one. It was sent to Paris." So I've always wondered what was in that file that I never got to see.
Can I take you back just to one of your first destinations? You said basket sliding. Did I hear that correctly? What is it?
It's a tradition on the island of Madeira, by the city of Funchal, and it was way up the mountainside where we went to go port tasting.
Well, why is it called basket sliding?
Oh, they'd slide down the hill in a basket. They had
What?
there was
Really?
like grassy hills, and you'd get to the top, and they'd give you a basket, and you'd slide down, and so it was a hoot.
Okay. So was this before drinking the wine or after the wine? Okay.
Uh, you
I'm seeing
know,
the odd injury here. Okay.
At Club Med one, I didn't drink that much, especially not during the day. And oftentimes at night, especially if I was tired, people had listened to me speaking and giving instructions, and they just assumed that I was perfectly fluent, which, I was definitely very functional, but I would get brain aches just trying to keep up with people because when they drink, they talk faster and faster and faster. And so I wasn't drinking that much on the ship.
Okay, sir, we are nearing the end of this wonderful time together with you again. I have I guess, a two-part question. You don't sound like you have regrets about Club Med. And two, did you learn anything or take anything from Club Med that helped you in your later career?
Well, I had a love affair with Club Med. Having a motorboat, the freedom to be on the water, the sports equipment, the wind toys, the ability to evolve my water skiing, windsurfing, sailboarding, snorkeling, diving. It was just a gift. But the time with the people, the public relations, the negotiating, the navigating difficult situations is really what has made me a sales ace. I'm at the top of the food chain in real estate, and I've taught negotiation skills and sales my entire career, including being the closer for a home improvement construction company. So the negotiation skills I would not have had without Club Med.
And I assume you've told me in the past, I can't remember if we touched on it in the first interview, but you were content, not, I guess, not furthering your career in club like management. You wanted to learn as much as you could about
Well,
the
I was with the people and I was gifted constantly by people. I also had my different resources for snorkeling and collecting bar beads from the pool skimmers. But, going out on the water in the boats, I would take people on little tours and sunset cocktail, tours. And it always ended up with gifts and benefits and relationships that you don't have if you're on the microphone all the time.
That's true. Yep. Never thought of it like that. Well, sir, is there anything we forgot to cover? We're nearing the end of our hour. You've been so kind with your time that I don't want to forget anything or anyone, or if anyone you'd like to
No, I
shout
think
out.
I think we're perfect.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming back again, Eric, and really delving into your time aboard the Club Med One because we've never had an XGO, talk in depth about that. And and to be honest, always I never really wanted to work aboard this ship until I boarded it one day in the port of Bodrum in '99 and went, oh, what an idiot I was for actually thinking that I didn't want to work there because it was beautiful. I saw the advantages, and so I'm happy that you got to have such a great time in your 8 months aboard there.
Donc, merci beaucoup, Monsieur Swan.
Nice. Well, guys, so don't forget with this episode, please go to the website, www.myfirstseason.com, and you can listen to Eric's in-depth interview about his first season in Turks and Caicos in 1987. So please listen to that. And this one as a companion piece. And we're going to work on getting those videos uploaded somewhere for you. Okay. So once again, Eric, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story with us. Would you like to thank our listeners?
Au revoir. A bientôt.
And we'll see you all next week, everyone. Bye.